officials. They posted these pictures of themselves on Facebook. So how did they get in and get past all the security? Is this a major security breach we're talking about? We have joining us right now Roxanne Roberts, who is the Washington Post reliable source columnist and just broke this story. She is on the telephone with us, also CNN national security contributor. Oh no, Roxanne, we have you in person.
Barely, but I'm here.
I know, you barely made it.
Yeah.
Also with us on the phone is CNN national security contributor Fran Townsend, who worked at the White House, of course, with the Bush administration. Roxanne, let me start with you on all this. You talked to the White House about this breach. What is their explanation?
Well, at first they basically didn't have an explanation other to say that somehow these people did in fact get through, but we didn't know why. Just a few minutes ago, the reason I'm late is that the Secret Service said there was a breach they did a preliminary investigation today, and one of the Secret Service checkpoints did not properly determine that these people were on the invited guest list, and then they got through. Now, we do need to say that they didn't have any weapons on them. They had to go through the magnetometers and all the physical things that would prevent them from being a risk. But nonetheless, we've got two people who show up at the White House and essentially walk in.
Well, and you said a breach at one of the security checkpoints.
Right.
I mean, you've been a Washingtonian for a very long time. I'm sure you've been to a few events at the White House. There's more than one checkpoint you got to go through, right?
Usually, what's interesting here is that you've got this very elegant formal affair. These people were dressed as if they were guests. There were a lot of guests arriving at the same time. And what they probably did is say something like, oh, there must be some mistake. My name's not on the list. And they were somehow able to typically what happens is that if you're a guest at the White House, in advance you have to provide your social security number, your date of birth, all that's pre-cleared, so that when you show up, all you have to do is show your identification. They check that, and then you go through the physical magnetometers and checks. In this case, they probably said the most likely thing is that, oh, there must be some mistake. I'm not on this list. And somehow, somebody at the White House decided after they looked at their ID that it was all right for them to go in.
And Roxanne, I know you've been doing a little digging on just who this couple is. What can you tell us about them?
They are reality show people, which is what's so
and that says it all.
It really kind of does. I was at the Booksellers last night, which is the entrance where all the guests came in, and when I saw them come in, I went, what? I thought to myself, what on earth are they doing here? They're not political. They're involved in a vineyard in Northern Virginia, and now we're talking about Tariq and Mikhail Salahi.
Right.
I want to pronounce that properly. And they had a dispute with their family with the vineyard in Virginia, very messy. There's some polo tournaments that, depending on who you believe, are kind of dicey, a little iffy. They're not at all political. So to see them walk in there, I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I wonder how they snagged an invitation to the most exclusive state dinner and the first of the Obama administration. And their names were not on the guest list, but it never occurred to me that they would have actually crashed this party.
And Fran, let me bring you into this. You worked at the White House. You've been to a lot of events like this. You certainly know what it's all about. What was your reaction when you heard this?
Well, first, Campbell, let me say, normally what happens when you come up to the first the first perimeter checkpoint where the Secret Service is, there's also a member of the Social Secretary's office. It'll typically a young staffer with a clipboard that has the names in case just such a thing happens, so that if you get up there and you're not in the Secret Service system and there's some, dispute, you go over to the Social Secretary's person and she'll check to see if there was some mistake in not putting you in the system. If you're not in the system and your name is not on the Social Secretary's list, you don't get in typically. And so you have to wonder, this was a very large event. Typically state dinners are held in the East Room, which holds somewhere in the neighborhood of 175 people for a seated dinner. This had over 300. And I imagine the size of it and the chaos of everyone arriving at the same time, and frankly the lack of experience of people who would have been helping the Secret Service at the gate contributed to this. We ought to tell people that this is not sort of a minor infraction if you're these two people who got in improperly. It's a potential felony. They would have had to have made a false statement to the Secret Service agent and the Social Secretary's person both federal officials, that that there was a mistake, that they were supposed to be on the list. That's a lie, and that's a federal felony for which they can serve jail time. It's not just a misdemeanor for trespassing. It's a potential felony.
Now, Fran, let me ask you too, and Roxanne, I'd be curious about your reaction, but Fran first. I mean, I don't want to be an alarmist about this, you know, and we do know they went through the metal detectors and they didn't have any weapons on them or anything, but you know, in this day and age, we know this president, the first African-American president, has more threats against him than any other president. The Secret Service talked about that. A crazy person could, who got in uninvited, grab a fork and do something insane, right? I mean, this is not just something to joke about. Am I being fair?
You know, you are being fair, and I had, Campbell, I had the exact same reaction. Even before I left the White House in January of '08, we were concerned about the level of threats and sort of hateful speech and threats directed against not only the president but the first family. And so I think you're absolutely right. We ought to be concerned. There are special screening procedures that go on that you don't see and you don't realize for other types of devices and weapons, whether it's radiological or biological. But you do worry about something less than a weapon, an obvious weapon being snuck through, and you worry just the mere physical proximity in a social setting where literally you can walk up and touch the president and first lady. It would be a concern regardless of the circumstances. This is a real problem, and I don't have any doubt the Secret Service, the Social Secretary's office, and frankly, I'm sure the Chief of Staff will have to do a thorough investigation, and I imagine anybody showing up for the next state dinner better leave plenty of time to screen security, because they'll be very careful the next time.
No kidding. Roxanne, what do you think? Are there going to be some real fallout from this?
I think there will be, because I think it's important for people to understand exactly what this couple was able to do once they got in the White House. They were announced as if they were invited guests. They went through, as you saw, all the entrance.
I was going to say, we've shown people pictures. Yeah. She's got her arm around Joe Biden.
I'm sure she went up and said, "Oh, I'm a huge fan. Can I have a picture?" She was right next to Rahm Emanuel. She was next to the mayor of D.C. and his wife. I mean, they were right next to each other, curled up, very happy. You know, and that's a little scary, because I'm sure that none of those people had any idea who they were, and it never occurred to them that they weren't supposed to be at this event. And they pose for pictures with people all the time without having any real sense of who that person is.
Well, Roxanne, appreciate you scrambling to get this story on our air. Roxanne Roberts tonight from the Washington Post, and Fran Townsend. Many thanks to both of you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Campbell.